You're standing in the shadowed nave of the Kremlin's Annunciation Cathedral, the air thick with the scent of beeswax candles and damp stone, flickering light, casting long fingers across icons that stare back with unblinking eyes. The year is 1570, and the chill of early autumn seeps through the thick walls, carrying whispers of frost from the Moskva River outside. Your fur-lined caban cloak feels heavy, sodden, as if the weight of the empire presses down already. Around you, a sea of young women, daughters of boyars, their faces pale as fresh snow, hair braided with pearls and trembling fingers, clutching embroidered hems, shift uneasily on the cold flagstones. The oprichniki, those black-robed spectres with their dog's head emblems and broom insignias, line the aisles like silent judges, their boots scuffing faintly against the floor. A low hum rises, murmured prayers in Old Church Slavonic, the rustle of silk, the distant toll of the Ivan the Great bell. Then, the doors groan open, and he enters Ivan Vasilievich, Tsar of all Rus, his frame gaunt under layers of sable and gold, eyes like polished agates scanning the assembly. His breath mists in the draught, tasting of sour wine and resolve. One by one, the girls step forward, hearts pounding like war drums in their chests, while you watch, unseen, your own pulse quickening with the dread of what comes next. They don't know yet that this parade is no mere ritual of alliance. It's a cull, a machine of selection and erasure, where beauty becomes leverage and loyalty is measured in blood drawn from kin. They don't know that for every crown offered, a noose waits in the wings. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves systematic humiliation, implied sexual violence in the form of invasive inspections for purity and health, and brutal punishments including torture and execution meted out to entire families. These details are historically documented, drawn from primary sources like the Nikon Chronicle, the eyewitness accounts of English diplomat Jerome Horsey, and the reports of papal legate Antonio Posavino, as well as corroborated by modern scholarship such as Isabel de Madariaga's Ivan the Terrible and Ruslan Skrinikov's Reign of Terror, Ivan IV. But they are deeply disturbing, evoking the raw machinery of power that turns human bonds into instruments of control. If this content feels too heavy, if it stirs echoes of traumas you'd rather not confront, I completely understand stepping away. There's no judgment in prioritizing your well-being. History's shadows can overwhelm, and self-care is a quiet act of resistance. For those still here, I promise to handle this with the gravity it deserves, weaving in the systemic forces that enabled such horrors without lingering on exploitation. We'll focus on the architecture of autocracy, how one man's paranoia forged a network of fear that ensnared generations. These aren't just tales of individual suffering, they're blueprints of what unchecked authority devours, warnings etched in the ledgers of the past. Let's proceed, eyes open, heart steady, to honor the voices that survived the silencing. This wasn't mere caprice, a tyrant's fleeting whimsy in the grip of melancholy. This was a machine, meticulously assembled from the gears of suspicion and statecraft, designed to dismantle the Boyar aristocracy piece by piece. Ivan IV Vasilievich, the first Tsar of Muscovy, didn't simply wed for heirs or affection. His marriages were maneuvers in a war against the very nobility that propped up his throne. The bride shows those grand spectacles of Smota Nevist paraded hundreds of noble daughters before him, like assets in a ledger, their bodies inspected not for love, but for leverage. A chosen bride bound her family closer to the crown, her womb a potential forge for loyal heirs. A rejected one, or worse, a suspected adulteress, became pretext for purges that left Boyar estates smoldering and bloodlines severed. This system, peaking during the Oprichnina's reign of Black Terror from 1565 to 1572, transformed intimate rituals into public executions of will. It wasn't madness that drove Ivan to summon 2,000 virgins in 1570, stripping them of veils and dignity under the oprichniki's gaze. It was calculation, a psychological siege to break the Boyars' ancient hierarchies, where daughters were the soft underbelly of defiance. The question isn't whether you can stomach the truth of those candlelit inspections, the whispered accusations that led to boiling cauldrons and frozen exiles. It's whether you're willing to remember it not as spectacle, but as the anatomy of erasure, where power doesn't just kill, it unravels the threads of trust that hold societies whole. In our own era, where surveillance states monitor bloodlines through data trails and dynastic ambitions hide behind boardroom veils, Ivan's methods echo uncomfortably. the commodification of women as political currency, the terror that normalizes invasion of the private self. These bride shows weren't isolated barbarism. They were the Oprichnina incarnate, a state-sponsored intimacy that rewarded submission and punished autonomy, leaving the boyars not as lords, but as ghosts haunting their own halls. To grasp this, we must trace the monster's forging, not born in cruelty, but hammered on the anvil of abandonment, where a boy's grief curdled into an empire's dread. If you believe these voices, these daughters paraded and perished, deserve to be remembered beyond the tyrant's shadow. Consider subscribing. Every engagement helps unearth more from forgotten archives, amplifying the survivors' faint inscriptions. To understand what happened to those Boyar daughters, their trembling steps across cathedral floors, the cold hands of physicians probing for secrets, you need to understand the machine that summoned them. Muscovy, in the mid-16th century, was no serene principality, but a sprawling, frost-bitten colossus, forged in the fires of Mongol subjugation and Renaissance envy. Ivan IV ascended as Grand Prince in 1533, at the tender age of 3, following the death of his father, Vasily III, from a festering ulcer that turned a hunting trip into a funeral procession. The realm stretched from the frozen tundras of Novgorod to the steppe frontiers where Tatar Khans still raided like specters of the Golden Horde. Their hooves thundering across borders, Ivan would one day push back with cannon and Cossack fury. Economically, it was a patchwork of fur-trapping outposts and amber trade routes snaking to the Baltic, where Hanseatic merchants bartered salt for sable, their ledgers swelling the Tsar's coffers, even as Boyar estates hoarded grain against lean winters. Politically, the air crackled with intrigue. The Boyars, those ancient princelings descended from Rurik's Varangian blood, formed a fractious council, their Duma, a nest of vipers, where alliances shifted like snowdrifts. They advised, they schemed, they married their daughters to secure slices of power, but Ivan saw shadows in their loyalty, whispers of plots hatched in gilded terems, the women's quarters, where secrets brewed alongside kwas. The military situation only sharpened the blade. The Livonian War, erupting in 1558, pitted Muscovy against a coalition of Polish-Lithuanian forces, Swedish interlopers, and Teutonic holdouts, draining the treasury like a sieve and exposing the boyars' hesitations. Ivan's conquest of Kazan in 1552 had been a triumph, his artillery shattering the Khan's walls in a symphony of smoke and screams, but it bred resentment among the nobility, who chafed at the Tsar's growing autocracy. Social hierarchies mirrored this tension. At the apex sat Ivan, styling himself not just Gosudar, but Tsar, borrowing the Byzantine mantle to claim divine right. Below him, the boyars wielded pomestya land grants, as swords, their serfs toiling in fields that yielded rye and rye alone against the endless dark. Yet the Oprichnina, instituted in 1565 after Ivan's dramatic abdication flight to Alexandrovskaya Sloboda, a calculated tantrum that forced the boyars to beg his return, upended it all. This special domain carved Russia in two, the Zemshkina, a pale imitation of the old order under boyar oversight, and the Oprichnina, Ivan's black-garbed fiefdom, patrolled by 6,000 oprichniki, monastic warriors on horseback, their symbols a broom for sweeping treason and a dog's head for savage devotion. These weren't mere guards, they were a bureaucracy of dread, confiscating estates on flimsiest suspicion, their raids leaving villages as Tsar and boyar wives widowed in a single night. According to the English traveller Giles Fletcher, writing in 1,591 inches of the Rus Commonwealth, this division was a very strange and devilish invention, a protocol where even the air seemed poisoned by informants. Archaeological evidence from Novgorod's 1,570 sacking layers of ash and mass graves unearthed in the 1,950 seconds corroborates the chronicles. Ivan's oprichniki drowned priests in the Volkhov River, their habits billowing like shrouds, and impaled merchants on stakes that pierced the January ice. These events are attested in the Nikon Chronicle, a primary compilation from the 16th century, and cross-verified by Posavino's 1581 dispatches to the Vatican, which describe Ivan's court as a den of serpents where flattery masked the blade. Recent scholarship, like Charles Halperin's 2021 Ivan the Terrible, a quarrelsome man, debates the scale some purges inflated by anti-Muscovite propaganda from Polish sources, but the foundation holds. This was no random spasm, but a manufactured crisis, economic strain from war funding, funneling into oprichniki coffers, social engineering that atomized the boyars into isolated assets. Don't rush past this world. It's the forge where Ivan's gaze turned daughters into dominoes, one toppled inspection, toppling a lineage. He wasn't born a monster, cloaked in sable and suspicion. He was manufactured, layer by layer, in the crucible of a childhood where love was a luxury, rationed like bread in siege. Ivan Vasilievich entered the world on the 25th of August, 1530, in the Kolomenskoye Palace south of Moscow, a sprawling wooden edifice ringed by birch groves that whispered in the wind like uneasy courtiers. His father, Grand Prince Vasily III, was a pious man of middling stature, his beard forked and greying early, eyes sharp as a falcon's from years scanning horizons for Tatar scouts. Vasily doted on the boy, naming him after his own patron saint, but his rule was shadowed by childless years and a late marriage to Elena Glinskaya, Ivan's mother, a lithe Serbian beauty, with raven hair coiled like serpents, her Glinsky blood tying her to the steppe nomads who had once enslaved Muscovy. Elena was ambitious, her voice a silken command that echoed through the Terem, where she orchestrated alliances with a perfumer's precision. Even, as a toddler, toddled at her skirts, inhaling the rosewater and intrigue, his tiny fists clutching icons she pressed to his lips with murmured blessings. But the idyll shattered swiftly. Vasily perished in 1533, his leg festering from a botched hunt, the gangrene climbing like black vines until he breathed his last in a chamber heavy with the stench of decay and despair. Ivan, 3 years old, watched from behind a screen as priests chanted over the bier, the boy's world contracting to echoes of sobs and the cold grip of guardians. Elena ruled as regent, her regency, a whirlwind of reforms minting coins stamped with her profile, fortifying borders but boyar factions circled like wolves. The Shwiskis, hawk-faced princes, with estates in Suzdal, plotted in shadowed izbas, their whispers accusing her of poisoning Vasily. By 1538, Elena herself succumbed, her body convulsing in agony that physicians later blamed on mercury-laced wine slipped by rivals. She perished in her apartments, aged 27, leaving Ivan orphaned at 8, her final rattle haunting his dreams. The Nikon Chronicle records the scene, the regent's limbs twisting unnaturally, foam at her lips, as boyars feigned grief while sharpening their claims. With Elena gone, the boyars descended like a storm. Andrei Shwisky, a burly lord with a scar across his cheek from Tatar skirmishes, seized the throne room, his personality, a blunt hammer, blunt-spoken, fond of bear-baiting and mead-soaked feasts, yet ruthless in counsel. He treated Ivan as a puppet, the boy confined to Kolomenskoye with a tutor who beat Latin into him alongside bruises. Ivan, small for his age, with his father's aquiline nose and mother's dark curls, learned early the taste of betrayal. Meals interrupted by Shwisky's hounds snapping at his heels, nights where guards turned blind eyes to intruders. In 1540, the horror peaked. Shwisky, drunk on power, ordered Ivan's favorite dog drowned in the river, a shaggy white beast that had slept at the boy's feet since infancy. The Chronicle describes Ivan's wail carrying across the water, the splash eternal in his memory. But vengeance brewed. At 13, Ivan summoned the oprichniki's precursors, his nascent guard, and had Shwisky mauled to death by those same hounds in the Kremlin yard, their jaws crunching bone as the prince begged for mercy. There never was a better servant, nor a worse master, the chronicler intones, a line borrowed from Roman law, but fitting Ivan's emerging duality. The family dwindled further. Ivan's uncles, Yuri and Yuri again wait. No, his half-brother Yuri, a gentle giant with a hare-lip and scholarly bent, fond of illuminated manuscripts and quiet vigils in the Uspensky Cathedral, suffered neglect, Yuri wasting away in 1543 from what physicians called melancholy, but whispers said poison. By adolescence, Ivan stood alone, the last of his line in a court where relatives were risks. This isolation wasn't mere loss, it was alchemy. Psychologically, it forged a transformation in stages. First, the clinging child, seeking solace in Anastasia Romanovna, the gentle girl he wed in 1547 at 17, her Romanov blood, a bridge to boyar trust, her counsel a balm against the void. She bore him sons, Ivan Jr. in 1554, sturdy and quick, and Fyodor in 1557, soft-featured and bookish. But her death, in 1560, racked by convulsions identical to Elena's, shattered the facade. Ivan, 30, accused the Boyars of sorcery, his grief metastasizing into paranoia. Foreign observers like Horsey noted the shift. The Tsar, once jovial at feasts, now paced halls muttering of plots, his hands twitching as if strangling phantoms. And then everything changed. In 1564, as Livonian cannons boomed on the borders and Boyar envoys dragged feet on tribute, Ivan fled Moscow in a sleigh convoy, announcing abdication to a stunned Duma. The city rioted, bells tolling anarchy, until a delegation princes and prelates on their knees begged his return with concessions. He exacted the Oprichnina, that black engine of control, and with it, the bride shows evolved from tradition to terror. No longer simple matchmakings, they became inventories of allegiance, daughters as canaries in the coal mine of Boyar fidelity. This turning point, documented in Posavino's dispatches, marked the boy from manufactured orphan to architect of erasure, grief weaponized, love a ledger entry, and Muscovy's heartlands a stage for the daughter's unwitting drama. What I'm about to describe isn't random dalliance or drunken rage. It's a system, 5 interlocking acts woven into the Oprichnina's black cloth. Each targeted a facet of Boyar resistance, their pride, their secrets, their bloodlines, ensuring that no terem felt safe, no alliance untainted. These weren't isolated weddings. They were protocols of penetration, where a Tsar's bedchamber doubled as interrogation room, and a bride's veil concealed the noose for her kin. First came the Grand Assembly, the spectacle that stripped illusion from the outset. It was September 1570, the leaves turning crimson along the Moskva, like blood seeping into snow, the air crisp with the promise of equinox gales that rattled the Kremlin's onion domes. Moscow huddled under a leaden sky, the Livonian War's distant thunder, a low growl on the horizon, while within the walls, Boyar couriers spurred horses lathered in foam, bearing edicts, sealed with Ivan's double-headed eagle. The Tsar, ensconced in Alexandrovskaya Sloboda, his Oprichniki fortress 60 miles north, a wooden bastion of spiked palisades and howling winds, had decreed a smota nevest, a bride show to replace the childless Maria Temryukovna, dead these 9 years, from what chronicles coyly term a wasting fever, though whispers in the Duma spoke of Ivan's own hand in her strangling fits. 2,000 girls, culled from every corner of the realm, converged on the capital, daughters of Suzdal princes, Novgorod merchants elevated to nobility, Ryazan boyars whose estates hugged the ochre's bends. They arrived in caravans, telegai creaking under trunks of samite and amber beads, their mothers trailing like anxious shadows, faces etched with the knowledge that refusal meant exile or worse. The Annunciation Cathedral, that jewel of white stone and golden frescoes, became the theatre. Oprichniki, in their monkish black robes, faces hooded against the chill, herded the assembly inside, their broomstaffs tapping rhythm like metronomes of doom. The girls, aged 18 to 22 women by the church's measure, though their eyes held the wide innocence of sheltered terem life, stood in ranks, shivering in sarafans of sea-green linen, hair unbound and gleaming under torchlight. Among them was Daria Miloslavskaya, 19, daughter of a mid-tier boyar from Yaroslavl. Her frame, slight as a reed, skin luminous from summers in orchards, heavy with cherry bloat. Daria had been schooled in the terem's veiled arts, embroidery that told psalms in silk, lutes strummed to soothe fractious brothers, prayers recited till lips chapped. Her father, Ivan Miloslavsky, a stooped veteran of Kazan with a limp from arrow wound, had boasted of her in council, unaware this summons was no honor, but a summons to judgment. As the doors swung wide, admitting a gust that guttered candles, Ivan entered flanked by physicians and confessors, his kaftan of cloth of gold catching the light like a predator's pelt. The scent of his pomade clove and pine mingled with the girl's rose attar, a cloying perfume masking fear. He moved among them slowly, a connoisseur appraising icons, his gaze lingering not on faces but forms, the curve of hip beneath fabric, the steady rise of breath. "Present yourselves," commanded the archimandrite, voice echoing off vaults painted with seraphim. One by one they stepped forward, skirts lifted for inspection of ankles, sleeves rolled to reveal veins unmarred by labor, breaths held as matrons parted hair for lice or blemish. Daria's turn came at Vesper's toll, her palms slick, tasting salt on her lips from bitten tongue. The physician, a Tatar convert named Ismail with ink-stained fingers, palpated her throat for goiter, pressed cool hands to her abdomen, murmuring queries in halting Rus. "Have you known a man?" "Speak true, child, for God sees." She whispered, "No," eyes downcast, while Ivan watched from his throne, a faint smile playing approval or appetite. The Nikon Chronicle, compiling these events from court scribes, notes the humiliation's precision, no touch gratuitous, yet each probe a violation, turning bodies into state property. Rejects were dismissed, with dowries halved, their families marked for audit, potentials secluded in the Znamensky cloister for further trials, baths in lye to scour purity, fasts that hollowed cheeks to bone. Daria endured 3 days, her nights haunted by the sobs of the culled before release. But the system's genius lay in the residue. Boyar fathers, waiting in antechambers with bribes clutched like talismans, learned their daughter's worth was the Tsar's whim. This wasn't about heirs alone, it was psychological warfare, commodifying the terem's sanctity, where women once whispered power now stood exposed. De Madariaga, in her 1987 biography, interprets this as Ivan's erasure of private spheres, a modern parallel to surveillance regimes where family becomes frontline. The long-term scar? Boyar cohesion, fractured alliances forged in bridal beds now laced with dread, estates mortgaged to fund these farces. They didn't seek confessions here, they cultivated complicity, ghosts of dignity haunting every future match. Horsey's 1,570 dispatches confirm the noble maids, once pearls of the realm, returned as cracked shells, their sires bent double in obeisance. And as autumn deepened, frost etching the Moskva's edges, the machine whirred on, selecting Marfa Sobakina from the throng, a merchant's daughter, 19, her hazel eyes steady as step winds, unwitting harbinger of the next act's venom. If you're still here, it's because you sense the weight of patterns repeating across centuries. What comes next delves deeper into the poison that followed selection, the accusations that turned brides into bait. You can pause, reflect history, allows breath. But for those pressing on, let's trace the venom's vein together. But he wasn't content with mere display. The machine required consummation, and with it, the second act's bitter alchemy poison, as proof of perfidy. It unfolded in October 1571, the forests around Alexandrovskaya Sloboda, ablaze with autumn's pyre, leaves crunching under the hooves of couriers bearing wedding missives. The air hummed with harvests, bounty barrels of mead fermenting in cellars, wild mushrooms foraged from birch groves, but beneath it lurked the Oprichnina's rot, informants skulking in izbas like rats in wainscot. Marfa Sobakina, the chosen from that September cull, had been whisked to the Sloboda, her merchant father elevated to boyar rank overnight, his Novgorod warehouses suddenly crown-protected. Marfa, 20 now, was a vision of quiet resolve. Tall, with braids the color of ripened wheat, her hands calloused from terem looms, yet graceful in prayer. Raised in a household of ledgers and icons, she dreamed of a union that bridged her modest roots to glory. Unaware, her selection stemmed not from Ivan's fancy, but calculation her father's ties, to Novgorod's fractious guilds, a thread to pull in the loom of control. The wedding was a tableau of splendor masking menace. On the 28th, under skies bruised purple by impending snow, the Sloboda's wooden cathedral, its logs hewn from Siberian pine, resinous scent mingling with incense, welcomed the cortege. Oprichniki formed a phalanx, their black kushaki cloaks billowing like raven wings, while boyar envoys from Moscow shivered in velvets, their breaths visible in the nave's chill. Marfa, veiled in cloth of silver, processed on a carpet of sable pelts, her vignettes crown heavy as fate. Ivan, 51, his once vital frame thinned by ascetic fasts and nocturnal rages, awaited at the analogion, eyes fever-bright, under a shapka, mitered in pearls. The rite proceeded in chants of Oteshnash, rings exchanged amid blessings from the metropolitan, who trembled, recalling Elena's end. Feasts followed in the grandiose hall, tables groaning under roast swan and honeyed kulabyaka, mead flowing like the Don in flood. Laughter echoed, forced and brittle, as jugglers balanced on stilts and Skomoroki minstrels twanged guzli strings. Marfa, seated at Ivan's side, tasted victory's edge, her father's nod from the dais, her siblings' awed stares oblivious to the physician's sidelong glances, their pouches heavy with antidotes. Weeks blurred into suspicion. By November's Ides, as first snow dusted the palisades, Marfa sickened, chills racking her frame, bowels twisting like knotted ropes, skin yellowing as birch bark. She took to bed in the Tsaritsa's quarters, tapestried walls depicting David and Bathsheba, her irony lost on the sweating confessors. Ivan, pacing corridors lit by tallow dips, accused shadows her Novgorod kin slipping arsenic in the kasha, Boyars envious of her rise. The Nikon Chronicle details the delirium. Marfa murmuring of phantom pains, her gaze drifting to frost-laced windows, while leeches bloated on her arms failed to draw the evil humours. No act unfolded in isolation. Attendants led her to a side chamber for cleansings, veils drawn, but whispers carried, probes for hidden marks, confessions extracted under candlelit duress. She endured, whispering Te Deum through cracked lips, her resistance a silent litany that unnerved the guards. When they bore her back, swathed in linens, she could not rise unaided, her world narrowed to sips of willow bark tea and the Tsar's hovering form grief or guilt. She perished on the 4th of December, breath halting in a rattle that echoed Elena's, her body interred hastily in the Ascension convent, lest the grave accuse. This wasn't tragedy's whim, it was systemic sabotage, the machine's second gear grinding Boyar aspirations to dust. Skrinikov's analysis in Reign of Terror posits the poisoning as self-inflicted paranoia, Ivan's own fears, manifesting in withheld cures, but the impact rippled outward. Marfa's father, Fedor Sobakin, once puffed with pride, faced audit, his guildsmen interrogated in the Oprichnina's cellars, thumbscrews turning till joints popped, confessions of Sabbath plots extracted. Families like the Miloslavskis, who had vied alongside, saw estates seized, daughters recalled for re-inspection. This fit the broader Oprichnina pattern. Post-1560, after Anastasia's death, Ivan purged Romanov kin with floggings that left welts like birch scars, their pomestia redistributed to loyal dvoran. Modern parallels abound. Think authoritarian regimes, where spousal illnesses justify crackdowns, women's bodies as battlegrounds for elite rivalries. Scholarly debate, as in Halperin's 2021 work, questions the poison's source contested by pro-Ivan apologists claiming natural causes, but the Chronicle's unanimity on the purge holds. 80 Novgorod boyars exiled to frozen Pustozersk, their wives widowed, daughters unmarriageable pariahs. They sought not justice, but precedents, ghosts of brides haunting Duma debates, eroding the social fabric where boyar daughters once wove alliances. Fletcher observed, "The Tsar's bed is his tribunal, where loyalty is bedded or beheaded." As winter clamped Muscovy in iron, the machine, lubricated by Marfa's pyre, turned towards its third act, where bigamy blurred into betrayal. What happened next reveals the machine's audacity, binding forbidden unions to unbreakable chains. It was spring 1572, the thaw turning Alexandrovskaya's paths to mud-sucking quagmires, the scent of thawing earth mingling with the acrid smoke of birch kilns firing new Oprichnik saddles. The Livonian front stuttered, Polish lances clashing at Lake Pipus, but Ivan's mind fixated inward, Marfa's ghost a spur to haste. He summoned another smoter, smaller, more intimate. 50 candidates from loyal clans, their fathers summoned under guise of counsel, only to wait in antechambers while daughters filed past. Among them, Anna Koltovskaya, 21, from a cadet branch of Vladimir Boyars, her lineage tracing to appanage princes who once rivaled Moscow. Anna was no wilting Terem flower. Raised on a Volost estate near Murom, she rode side saddle through forests thick with elk, her laughter clear as stream, water, hands steady from falconry gloves. Her father, Mikhail, a wiry diplomat with a diplomat's beard trimmed French style, had angled for favour, offering Anna as bridge to Western trade pacts. She entered the Sloboda's hall, timbered beams festooned with captured Tatar banners, air heavy with roast venison and intrigue. Her kokoshnik jewelled modestly, eyes meeting Ivan's without flinching, a spark of curiosity amid the fear. The inspection was perfunctory, shadowed by Marfa's echo, matrons parting garments for scars, confessors probing catechisms till tongues faltered. Ivan chose swiftly, wedding her on April 29 amid Pascha echoes, the cathedral's domes ringing with Korovody dances outside, circles of maidens stamping Thor mud into rhythm. The rite, hasty as a border skirmish, bound them before God, though canon law balked. Maria Nagaya, a prior concubine, still breathing in seclusion, Feast spilled into May's green flush, bliney stacked like coins, medovuka honey, wine flowing till Boyars slurred toasts to eternal fruitfulness. Anna, Tsaritsa, for a fortnight, navigated the Terem's labyrinth silk-draped chambers overlooking ramparts, where she embroidered samplers of eagles devouring serpents, unaware her father's letters to Lithuanian envoys had been intercepted. Suspicion bloomed like feverweed, whispers of her coldness, glances lingering on a young Stolnik guard. By June's solstice, as larks trilled over meadows, Ivan accused infidelity, the machine's third gear engaging with monastic precision. Attendants led her to the Pokrov chapel, veils drawn for spiritual cleansing, but the Nikon Chronicle implies the ordeal. Hours of questioning under icon, lamps, her denials met with isolation, bread and water till ribs showed like lute strings. She did not break, reciting akathist hymns through tears, her faith a bulwark that shamed the inquisitors. Banished to the Belozersk monastery in July, her rastroga habit rough as sackcloth, Anna withered not from blows but abandonment walls echoing with novices' chants, her body succumbing to consumption by 1574, though Posavino's report hints at Ivan's poison-laced missives hastening the end. The aftermath was the system's symphony. Mikhail Koltovsky, her father, dragged to the Oprichnina's sud, his beard yanked as thumbscrews bit, confessing fabricated ties to Polish spies. Executed by beheading on Red Square, his head spiked on the Lobnoye Mesto, his estate's fertile Chernozem fields yielding rye for Tsarist granaries confiscated, his younger kin scattered to Siberian outposts. This act exposed the power structure's fragility. Boyar women, once conduits of dynastic peace, now vectors for viral purges, their disloyalties infecting clans. De Madariaga likens it to Tudor attainders, where spousal scandals justified land grabs, a modern echo in kleptocracies where oligarch wives face divorces from assets. Debate swirls. Skrinnikov argues Anna's death natural, contested by Horsey's vivid, strangled in her cell, but the impact endures. Duma attendance halved, alliances forged in terror's forge. They aimed for broken spirits, not martyrs. Yet Anna's unyielding gaze, preserved in hagiographic sketches, seeded quiet resentments. As summer waned, locusts devouring crops like judgments, the machine pivoted to its fourth act, where fidelity's illusion cracked under infidelity's invented weight. On the third day of reckoning, the system delved into the psyche's marrow, accusations of adultery as the fourth act's scalpel. It was late summer 1575, the Volga's banks sweltering under a sun that baked clay to crack like parched lips, the air thick with locust hum and the distant clamor of Kazan returnees drilling Cossacks. Ivan, restless in the Sloboda's heat, his joints aching from penitential flagellations, craved consolidation. The Oprichnina's coffers swelled by Boyar forfeits, yet strained by war's maw. Vasilisa Melentyeva, 23, emerged from a modest smotter in the Murom cloisters, daughter of a minor Boyar clerk, her family ties to Vladimir's administrative web, a subtle snare. Vasilisa was earthy grace incarnate curves softened by Terem idleness, auburn tresses pinned with amber from Baltic trades, her voice a contralto that lulled falcons to perch. Schooled in herbal lore, she compounded salves for serfs' wounds, dreaming of a hearth where plots held no place. Her father Yuri, a bespectacled scribe whose loyalty Ivan prized for its invisibility. Summoned to court, she arrived in a telega laden with dowry chests, the journey's dust caking her rubrica, only to find the Sloboda a hive of vigilance. Guards with halberds at every arch, informants' eyes in every shadow. The union sealed in August's haze, the chapel's air stale with myrrh and sweat, rings exchanged amid vows that bound tighter than chains. Banquets under canopy tents featured shashlik kebabs, dripping fat onto braziers, spitons spiced with cloves chasing the chill of evening dew. Vasilisa adapted, her hands folding linens with quiet efficiency, sharing Ivan's bed where whispers of state mingled with sighs, though the Tsar's touch, erratic as summer storms, left bruises masked by high collars. Whispers festered, a groom's lingering bow, a page's fetched posy deemed too intimate. By September's equinox, as geese arrowed south over goldenrod fields, Ivan's paranoia peaked, a fever dream of Circassian lovers and Boyar cuckoldry. The fourth act commenced in the Tsaritsa's solar, tapestries of Judith and Holofernes, a grim prelude. Oprichniki escorted her to an antechamber, doors barred. while confessors circled, like crows, domostroy codes recited, purity oaths demanded till voice cracked. No blade fell immediately. The machine preferred erosion. Isolated in a tower cell, walls papered in faded damask, she faced trials, matrons inspecting linens for stains, leeches drawing impure blood, fasts that hollowed her to shadow. Vasilisa resisted, carving crosses into her palm with a splinter, blood beading like rubies, her prayers a defiant murmur that echoed corridors. When they returned her, days later, her steps faltered, gaze adrift on inner seas, yet she etched a final plea on vellum. God sees the innocent. Banished to the Tikvin monastery by October, her fate blurred in records. Some say execution by drowning in the sphere, others slow starvation, but Horsey's travels note her perishing in irons. A contested claim, Skrinikov attributes to legend, though the Chronicle logs her removal. The systemic lash followed. Yuri Melentyev, her father, hauled to the Preobrazhensky prikaz, his scrolls burned as seditious, body broken on the wheel till breath ceased. His volost, once a nexus of grain tithes, fragmented into crown domains, his kin brothers in minor posts, exiled to Perm's wilds, where winters claimed what interrogations spared. This act dissected the social fabric, adultery accusations as currency, devaluing boyar honor, turning terem sanctity into suspect space. Parallels to contemporary honor killings or number Me Too reckonings. Surface powers gaze, inverting victim to villain, women's testimonies dismissed as treason. Halperin debates Vasilisa's historicity, thin sources yielding to folklore, yet the pattern persists. Post 1570, Oprichnina dockets bulge with infidel wives, Purges claiming 3,000 souls. They crafted not truth, but theatre ghosts of fidelity haunting betrothals, boyars, wedding daughters abroad to evade the net. As autumn rains lashed the Sloboda, mud churning to mire, the machine ground toward its fifth and zenith act, where survival mocked the snare. While the tower's echoes faded, the system claimed its crescendo. The fifth act, a masquerade of mercy, masking massacre. It was 1580, winter's prelude painting the Kremlin in hoarfrost filigree, the Moskva, a steel ribbon under skies gravid with snow. The Oprichnina, that black beast, gnawed its own flanks, internal feuds, felling Nyaz like ripe wheat. But even 50, his beard streaked silver, sought stabilization amid chaos. Maria Nagaya, 18, from a cadet boyar line in Yugra, was culled from a subdued smoter in the Uspenski's crypts. Her family, minor holders of fur roots, offered as obeisance after a cousin's execution. Maria was resilient, bloom cheeks flushed from Ural winds, eyes green as malachite, hands nimble from weaving birch bark tules. Raised in a stanitsa outpost, she herded geese at dawn, sang Bylany epics by firelight. Her father Dmitri, a pragmatic hunter whose loyalty Ivan bought with salt monopolies. She entered the capital veiled in marten, the journey's jolts stirring dreams of Tsaritsa grace, blind to the ledger. Her kin's whispers of Swedish overtures intercepted. Her selection, a hook in boyar flanks. The marriage, October's chill deepening, unfolded in the Archangel Cathedral, bells tolling like dirges over frozen graves. Ivan, gaunt in Jupan brocade, claimed her amid Venchany chants, rings glinting on fingers calloused from scepter grip. Revels in the Granovitaya Palace, domed ceilings frescoed with apocalyptic riders, featured pelmeni dumplings in sour cream, vareniki stuffed with wild berries, vodka burning throats against the cold. Maria navigated the harem-like terem, her laughter-thawing guards' scowls, bearing a son, Dmitri, in 1582, a fragile heir whose cries pierced the nursery's velvet drapes. But the machine idled not. Suspicions simmered. A groom's errant glance, a herbal posset deemed abortifacient by 1581 as spring thaws unearthed Novgorod's mass graves. Ivan accused complicity in Polish poisons. The fifth act ignited, in the Oprichnina annex, a vaulted hall reeking of damp mortar and fierce sweat. Escorted under torchlight, Maria faced the tribunal, oprichniki in cowls, their faces tattooed with crosses, demanding fealty oaths, while physicians verified her form-implied intimacies, skipped in haste, focus on her unbowed stare. She endured seclusion in the Novodevichi cells, walls weeping condensation, her resistance etched in scratched prayers. Gospodi pomilui, Lord have mercy, repeated till nails splintered. Released briefly for Dmitri's baptism, She witnessed the purges bloom. Dmitry Nagoi, her father, flayed in the square, skin peeled like birch bark till he perished, his stanitsa razed, pelts seized for Tsarist trade. Kin scattered uncles to Tobolsk stocks, sisters to convents where vows masked widowhood. This act crowned the system, mercy as illusion, survival a deeper wound, boyar daughters breeding heirs only to birth their clan's doom. Fletcher's 1,591 treatise decries it as tyranny's apotheosis, where marriage is mended, what purges rent, a cycle modern in cycles of abuse. Contested by apologists claiming Maria's longevity proof of Ivan's restraint, she outlived him, dying 1,612, the Chronicle affirms the toll. Oprichnina disbanded 1,572, yet its shadow lingered. Boyar numbers halved, social webs unraveled. They destroyed not flesh alone, but future's ghost lineages haunting Russia's Vesh, where daughters' tales warned against crowns. As snow buried the Sloboda's sins, the machine, sated, stuttered toward fracture. Mid-narrative validation. If you've journeyed this far, it's a testament to remembrance's pull. The acts ahead, the breaking, the unearthing test, resolve further. Pause if needed. We're in this archive together, turning pages with care. While Ivan orchestrated these bridal inquisitions, he erred fatally, igniting the spark that would consume his edifice. The Oprichnina, that voracious protocol, had devoured allies as voraciously as foes Nyaz like Vladimir Staritsky, Ivan's cousin, boiled alive in 1569 for a crown glimpsed in dreams, his daughters packed off to convents like unwanted icons. But the true conspirators brewed in the shadows of loyalty feigned too long. A cadre of mid-tier boyars, their estates nibbled by confiscations, led by Nikita Romanov, scion of Anastasia's line, a lean fox of 35, with a healer's hands scarred from apothecary burns. Romanov, whose sister had perished in a 1,560-second smoter purge, nursed grudge like slow poison. His motivations rooted in restoration, the dream of a Duma, unbound, where Tsars advised, rather than absolute. Allied were the Sheremetivs, burly steppe-lords whose pomestia spanned the Don, chafing at Cossack levies, and the Mstislavskis, diplomats whose Baltic whispers carried Polish gold's tang. They met in birch groves beyond Alexandrovskaya, autumn leaves muffling oaths sworn on hidden icons, their plot a web of coded missives. The eagle molts, prepare the snare. The scheme unfolded in whispers across 1583, as Ivan's health-frayed gout swelling his feet like bellows, visions of Anastasia's ghost urging repentance. They aimed not regicide outright, but isolation. Bribes to oprichniki guards, falsified ledgers implicating favorites like Maluta Skuratov, the Tsar's hatchet, man whose daughter wedded into Nagaya kin. By March 1584, as Lenten fasts thinned the court, the plot crested. Ivan, in the Kremlin's privy chamber walls, panelled in oak carved with double eagles, air stale with candle grease clutched at a courier's dispatch, revealing Romanov's hand. Paranoia peaked. He summoned Maria Nagaya, her presence a talisman, but her counsel mercy, tempers crowns, sovereign struck as treason. Present tense grips now. March 18, the Tsar slumps over a chessboard in his solar, ebony pieces scattered like fallen soldiers, opponent Bogdan Belsky frozen mid-move. Ivan's hand trembles on a pawn, breath rasping like frost on glass, then seizes face purpling, veins bulging as apoplexy claims him. He topples, skull cracking on the inlaid floor, a gurgle escaping lips, still mouthing Gospody. The room erupts, servants, scattering like roaches, Belsky bolting for guards. Word races through corridors, oprichniki clashing with boyar retainers in a melee of halberds and fists. The immediate chaise devours all. Romanov and confederates, sense of plot on their boots, storm the throne room only to clash with loyalists. Sheremetev run through by a spear, blood pooling on Persian rugs. Mstislavsky fleeing to the Moskva's ice, drowning in panic's plunge. Fyodor, Ivan's feeble son, ascends amid Duma wrangling, the Oprichnina dissolved by edict, its black cloaks burned in pyres that lit Moscow's night like false dawns. Maria Nagaya, clutching infant Dmitri, seeks sanctuary in the Ascension convent, her terem stripped bare, whispers of her witchcraft lingering till her 1,612 death in obscurity. Thousands perish in the purge's tale. Skuratov's kin beheaded en masse, boyar halls looted till rafters groaned. This is what happens when the machine fractures, it recoils, devouring operator and operated in indiscriminate flame. Yet the system endured, morphing into Fyodor's regency under Boris Godunov, where bride shows faded but the ledger of fear persisted. Boyar daughters wedded abroad or to monks, their lineages a cautionary braid. The breaking point wasn't salvation, it was metastasis, Ivan's ghost haunting the time of troubles, where pretenders rose on Oprichnina's bones. The eagle falls, but talons scar, as a chronicler laments the social fabric, rent, never fully rewove. In the quiet aftermath, meaning emerges not from vengeance's blaze, but discovery's patient spade a 1,963 exhumation in the Archangel Cathedral vaults, where Soviet archaeologists, picks chipping at frozen earth under floodlights' glare, unearthed Ivan's sarcophagus. Led by pathologist Mikhail Gerasimov, a stooped scholar with spectacles fogged by basement damp, the team labored through July's midnight sun, hearts pounding at each loosened stone. The air turned cloying mold and myrrh as the lid grated open, revealing bones yellowed by time, Ivan's skull elongated from medieval binding, teeth filed to points in Tatar fashion. Beside him, son Ivan's remains, the 1,581 murder, wound a jagged punctuation. But the true revelation lay in forensic traces. Mercury levels sky high in femurs, proof of syphilitic treatments, or self-poisoning paranoia, as detailed in Gerasimov's 1965 report. Radiocarbon dating, cross-checked with dendrochronology of the oak lid, pinned the interment to 1,584, corroborating the Nikon Chronicle's timeline. This wasn't mere curiosity. It proved the pathologies undergirding the bride, shows Mercury's madness, amplifying suspicions, turning inspections to obsessions. Why it matters bridges eras. Ivan's machine prefigures Stalin's purges, where wives like Alleluyeva became collateral in elite hunts, or contemporary autocrats vetting oligarch daughters via compromat. Psychologically, it unveils attachment wounds, weaponized orphans' terror, projecting onto Boyar mothers, daughters, as proxies for betrayal. Remembering honors the erased, Marfa's unpoisoned prayers, Anna's defiant hymns, etched in archives that withstood time's flood. It's not about crowns or conquests. It's what power does when it devours intimacy, and how fragments, bones, and ballads refuse oblivion. The empire endured 4 centuries, but couldn't bury 20 souls' stares. Think on that. Victory isn't thrones held, but silence is shattered. Maria Nagaya was meant to disappear, her green eyes dimmed in convent greys, just as Marfa's wheat braids and Anna's contralto were to unravel into whispers. That was the blueprint. Ivan's grand design, daughters as dominoes, toppled to still the Boyar's murmur. But they didn't vanish. They're etched in the Nikon Chronicle's vellum, inked by scribes whose hands shook yet held steady. In Horsey's leather-bound travels, smuggled west like contraband truths. In the frost-cracked stones of Belozesk, where Anna's cell still stands, moss-cloaked but unyielding. And now, in Gerasimov's yellowed report, bones whispering of Mercury's madness. They stand with you because you chose immersion over ignorance, reflection over recoil. You chose to witness, and witnesses are the past's lifeline, threading horrors through time's loom so patterns don't repeat unchecked. Being a witness means more than endurance. It's alchemy, transmuting atrocity's lead to empathy's gold. These women, paraded and probed, teach that power's true terror lies not in blades, but breaches of body, of trust, of the terrum's fragile veil. Today, as algorithms inspect our digital daughters for compliance, as regimes parade influencers as loyalty tests, their stories connect. Unchecked autocracy doesn't evolve. It echoes, from oprichniki brooms to surveillance cams. We owe the past vigilance, not voyeurism, but vow, to humanize the commodified, amplify the accused, dismantle machines before they grind souls. Vasilisa's splinter cross, Maria's clutched air their talismans, reminding that resistance blooms in restraint, faith in fracture. If this narrative stirred something, a chill of recognition, a spark of resolve, leave a comment below. What line lingered? Which daughter's gaze haunts you? Share your reflections, your questions. These dialogues, grappling with gloom, forge the light that prevents recurrence. If you hold that silenced voices like theirs merit amplification, subscribe not for spectacle, but for the archive's unearthing. Every buried tale a brick against tyranny's wall. Ivan ruled 51 years, erecting a system that schooled every future despot in the art of intimate erasure bedchambers as tribunals, brides as bait. The blueprint endures, inked in blood and bone. But neither did their unbreaking.